What is up, YouTube? Welcome into another edition of Texas Sports Unfiltered. I am BK Brad Kellner, and today, the goods, the bads, and the uglies from the Longhorns' 31-10 victory over Wyoming at DKR Texas Memorial Stadium last night. We're talking about all of them here on today's video. Please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. We are inching closer to 5,000 subs. And when we get there, we're going to have a massive giveaway. We've been working hard trying to put together some really cool prizes for y'all. And we've got a lot that you guys are going to have the chance to win when we get to that 5,000 subscriber mark. So please subscribe if you haven't yet. Please tell your friends and enemies. Obviously, the quicker we get to 5K, the quicker you guys will have the opportunity to cash in on some of those tremendous prizes that we have been putting together. All right. Texas gets the win, 31-10. That's the good news. Once again, we're talking good, we're talking bad, we're talking ugly. We'll start with the good, and the goodest good is the fourth quarter. This game was tied at 10 going into the final 15 minutes, and the Longhorns were able to open up a 21-point lead and ultimately finish it out with a 21-point win thanks to an incredibly strong fourth quarter. It started with the Xavier Worthy 44-yard catch and run touchdown, and then Texas never really looked back from there. They forced a 3-and-out to get the ball back. 6 plays, 75-yard drive, which was capped off by that Quinn Ewers 5-yard touchdown run. That made it a 2-score lead for the Longhorns, and then just a couple of plays later, you get the Jaron Thompson pick six, which was, for all intents and purposes, the dagger for the Longhorns in the fourth quarter. So, yeah, in the span of the first 7 minutes of quarter number 4, the Longhorns turned a 10-10 game into a 31-10 lead, and ultimately that was the final score last night. Obviously, the first 3 quarters, not great for Texas. We'll talk more about that in the bad and ugly parts of today's video, but the fourth quarter, great to see Texas playing complementary football, the offense figuring some things out, a couple of huge plays. Obviously, the Worthy touchdown. You had the long Jonathan Brooks run to set up that Quinn Ewers rushing touchdown. Finally, the offense was able to come out of its shell. It looked like they were stuck in neutral for the first 3 quarters last night. They were able to obviously turn it on in the fourth quarter when it mattered most to get the win. But man, it was uneasy for the first 45 minutes. If you were at DKR, hell, I was watching it cover 3. It didn't matter where you were. If you were a Texas fan, you were uncomfortable with what was going down over the first 3 quarters last night. Thankfully, the fourth quarter, Texas was able to get some things done, and they had a couple of big plays, not the deep shots that we saw against Alabama last week. Those were non-existent in the offense, unfortunately, again, for Texas tonight. But once again, the catch and run for Xavier Worthy just made a dude miss, and that guy's got elite speed. I mean, there's a reason. Hell, there are a few reasons why you're seeing his name pop up in the first rounds of 2024 NFL mock drafts. That dude is a special talent. And when he has the ball in his hands, we saw that in punt return too. Nearly broke a couple of big ones. Nearly scored a couple of times on punt return last night, but obviously made a dude miss. And then the speed down the right sideline. Not a lot of guys in college football can keep up with Xavier Worthy. He turned on the Jets. He went into 5th gear, and Wyoming had no chance. So that was great to see. That was the explosive play. And once again, the big Jonathan Brooks run on the following offensive drive for Texas. That was big time as well to help Texas take that 2-score lead. So obviously the fourth quarter, we were hoping to see that over the course of all 4 quarters, right? We didn't want to wait until the last hour or so of the game before we got to see Texas play the way that they had seemingly played last week against Alabama. But when it mattered most, look, they got a win. A win is a win is a win. It wasn't pretty, but thankfully the fourth quarter happened the way that it did, and the Longhorns avoided the same fate that Texas Tech had when they played Wyoming a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, you knew I was going to have to throw some sort of dig at Texas Tech. Come on, man. I wasn't going to go 5 minutes into this video without taking a shot at them. Texas, we're big brother. That's what we do. We avenged little brother's loss. Little brother was getting bullied. They needed some help. We stepped in and took care of business. Now, I wish we looked a little bit better in doing so, but ultimately, Texas gets the win. So obviously, the fourth quarter, my first good from Texas tonight, and then that'll just carry us over to good number two, and that's Jonathan Brooks. Obviously, the 61-yard run in the fourth quarter that I've referenced a couple of times in this video, that was his best carry of the night and the most explosive play of the night for this Texas offense. But 21 carries for 164 yards. I hate that he couldn't find the end zone, right? Nearly got there on that 61-yard run and then got, I think, a carry on the next play, but wasn't able to get there. Once again, Quinn Ewers ultimately scored the rushing touchdown there on that possession. But Jonathan Brooks, without C.J. Baxter, Brooks got his first start of the season. I think for the majority of the offseason, we all kind of assumed that Jonathan Brooks was going to be this team's starting tailback. C.J. Baxter had such a good fall camp. He did enough to overtake Jonathan Brooks. Over the first two games, I thought Baxter obviously showed me some things, but I still felt like Jonathan Brooks was the best running back on this team. He gets the chance to be the starter with C.J. Baxter sidelined with that ankle injury last night, and Jonathan Brooks stepped up. And as the game wore on, he got better and better and better. And he really picked it up in the fourth quarter. So a nice carryover from JB after what we saw in that final offensive possession in Tuscaloosa last weekend, right? That was what I've coined the Jonathan Brooks drive. Now, credit the O-line. They were a huge part of Texas being able to bleed the final 7 minutes and 14 seconds off the clock in that win in Tuscaloosa. But Jonathan Brooks, with C.J. Baxter on the sideline, he got all of those carries. He was able to pick up a few first downs on his own. He was massive down the stretch in that game, and he was great in the fourth quarter again last night, but was really good throughout. So first 100-yard rushing performance for Texas. And hey, Wyoming's run defense was very stout, right? Texas Tech couldn't get to 100 yards against them. The FCS team they played last week didn't get to 100 yards against them. Jonathan Brooks by himself with 164 in this one tonight. Once again, in the second half and really in the fourth quarter, he was able to kind of assert his will against that Wyoming defensive front. So Jonathan Brooks, a very good for Texas. I feel like there's obviously a role for C.J. Baxter on this team. The coaches obviously feel like there's a role for C.J. Baxter on this team. But through a quarter of the season, I feel like Brooks is Texas's best running back. So we'll see. He's got to work on those hands a little bit, right? We all remember the drop he had in week 1 against Rice and the drop he had last week against Alabama. Pass catching could use some work. But right now, just as a straight running back, I feel like Brooks is the best guy on this team. So it was good to see him, once again, kind of picked up where he left off, and good to see the Texas run game put up 185 yards. Far and away the best rushing output of the year for this Texas offense. And once again, doing it against a run defense that was giving up just 2.51 yards per carry. Double check myself. Make sure I've got that number right. Yep, 2.51 yards per carry. Texas last night, 5.97 yards per carry. Once again, the most for Texas this season and the most Wyoming has given up this season. Jonathan Brooks, a huge part of that. So those are the goods. The fourth quarter, that's the obvious one. The complimentary football with the Jaron Thompson pick six, that was huge. I could have started with the defense, right? The defense was good again. It's almost expected at this point. This defense is one of the best in all of college football. It really, to me, feels like a championship level defense. Now, I know what happened on Wyoming's first possession of the game. That's unacceptable. You can't be giving up 62-yard rushing touchdowns to Wyoming, and you can't have their running backs break away from your defense and go 62 yards without getting touched. That's basically what happened on that play. That wasn't great. Wyoming had a 10-plus minute drive in the third quarter. I think it was 10 minutes and 22 seconds, which thankfully for Texas ended up in a field goal. There was a very questionable pass interference penalty called that extended that drive. So I thought it should have been better, but the Zebras had to ruin all the fun like they always do. But that wasn't great. Like, that was Wyoming's game plan. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to control the clock, and they were able to do so. And Wyoming had the ball for 38 minutes and 47 seconds last night. Texas only had it for 21-13. It's more of the bad, ugly category. The good news, though, the defense was able to at least force a field goal out of that. And that made the game 10-10 versus Texas having to trail going into the fourth quarter if they had given up a touchdown in that spot. But look, 10 points, you're going to win just about every game you play in college football if you're holding your opponent to 10. And Texas held Rice to 10. They held Wyoming to 10. Obviously, the defense did a ton of good things against Alabama last weekend. So this defense is legit, man. Like the year 1 to year 2 jump from this group under PK was magnificent. I mean, they had given up, I think, 31 points per game back in 2021. Last year, it was 21 points per game, like a 10-point per game difference is ridiculous in college football. That's what Texas did. Going into this year, I was like, what was that, Gary Patterson? Was that PK? Hey, Texas loses some bodies from that very good defense in 2022. What's it going to look like this year? Well, through the non-conference slate, this defense has been salty. Man, they've got some dudes on that side of the ball. Jahdae Barron, hello. If you didn't know about him before last night, if you're watching this video, you probably did because you're probably a Texas fan. But there's some NFL scouts who are going to turn on that tape and be like, whoa, this guy can play. And yeah, Jahdae Barron is a Sunday player, and I think he made himself a little bit of money with what he did. But obviously, as a whole, this Texas defense, a very, very solid performance, especially when it mattered most. They got the job done once again. So it wasn't perfect. The long touchdown run, the long field goal drive, not ideal. And also going up against a backup quarterback, I thought that guy had a few more easy completions than I wanted for the most part. But once again, 10 points. That's the biggest stat. That's the biggest stat for me. How many points do you allow? And once again, you're going to win most games in college football. Hell, with this offense, you should win every freaking game if you can hold your opponent to just 10. So, yeah, an impressive showing once again for this Texas defense. Shout out to Barron Sorrell. I expected him on the pregame show I did with Bucky yesterday. He was my pick for defensive player of the game. He was all over the place. A huge sack, which forced Wyoming into that field goal on that drive that we've been talking about. And good to see him do his thing. And then who else? Anthony Hill made a couple of plays, although I kind of wish he played a little bit more. But yeah, overall, Texas, once again, 10 points. We'll take it 10 times out of 10. So those are the goods. All right. We spent 12 and a half minutes on goods. Don't say I'm a pessimist. Don't say I'm a negative Nancy. It's a lot of time talking about the good from last night. But unfortunately, there are some bads and there are some uglies that we have to get into. The bad, and if you want to categorize this as ugly, I wouldn't blame you too much, but just the offense for the first 3 quarters, man. I mean, it was Rice deja vu in the first half. Now, Texas actually was better against Rice in the first half, but go back a couple of weeks ago when I had people texting me at halftime wondering if Sark was going to make a change at quarterback. And there were a lot of Texas fans who were like, is yours the guy? What's going on here? That was bad. And last night wasn't much better, if it was better. Texas was 0 of 6 on third down. Quinn Ewers, let me pull up his stats for the first half. He was 8 of 17. It's a 47% completion percentage for 54 yards. It's 3.7 yards per attempt. Terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Texas had the long touchdown drive, took 8 minutes and 3 seconds. On their other 4 first half possessions, they held the ball for 3 minutes and 42 seconds. So it was a disaster. If you watch the game, you don't need me to tell you this. It was a horrible showing once again for this Texas offense. And everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, there were a lot of folks who weren't worried about this, but the word hangover was being used a lot leading up to this game. And it was clear that there was a little bit of a hangover for this Texas offense after what happened last week. And they were getting pats on the back. Everybody was giving them love after what they did in Tuscaloosa, and rightfully so. That was a massive win, and the offense showed up and showed out, especially in the fourth quarter last week. They absolutely got the job done, and it was one of the biggest regular season wins for Texas in school history. But it was an ugly showing, and you had punt, field goal, touchdown, punt, punt. That was the first half drive summary for this Texas offense. It was bad. The offensive line at times was getting pushed around by Wyoming. By Wyoming. Like, how do you look so good against Alabama and then look like that against Wyoming? The first offensive play of the game for Texas, a false start? Are you kidding me? Like, you go on the road to Bryant Denny with 100,000 rabid fans rooting against you, and you only have 4 penalties for the whole game, and then on your first offensive play back at home with a sellout crowd, you have a false start? Like, are you shitting me? What was that? And Sark talked about it in the post-game press conference, and it didn't make sense, and it was frustrating. That whole half of football for the offense was frustrating. So that's 2 times in 3 games where, yeah, Texas has looked very lackluster in the first half. You can criticize Sark for being a little vanilla. I thought I get Texas wants to pass a lot to set up the run, but I can't quite understand why Texas keeps throwing the ball on the first 3 plays of every single game that they have, especially in a game like this where you feel like you should be able to dominate in the trenches. It would make sense to establish the ground game a little bit. I didn't quite understand the opening script for Texas. They felt pretty vanilla, but I think it was a case of, more than anything else, guys, Texas spent the entire offseason focusing on 2 things: beating Alabama, winning the Big 12 championship. Nobody was talking about Rice. Nobody was talking about Wyoming. Those were those 2 other games, right? Rice was the game before Alabama, look ahead spot. Wyoming was the game after Alabama and before the start of conference play, kind of that stereotypical trap game. I don't want to sit here and say that and completely excuse Texas and the way that they played against Rice or Wyoming. But it's, I guess, human nature to understand that maybe things wouldn't always look so crisp and clean in those types of matchups, just with all the emphasis that was put on the Alabama game and with the importance that lies with Texas trying to win the Big 12 championship in their final year in this league. But just ugly. The stats awful, the eye test awful. And yeah, this Wyoming secondary, I think, entered this game 114th in the country in terms of passing yards allowed per game. And one of those games they played was against an FCS team. Okay. And they were 114th in all of college football in that stat. And Quinn Ewers, what did I say? How did I already forget this number? 54 yards in the first half. I mean, his overall stat line wasn't too much better, but 54 first half passing yards for Texas. Not very good there. Other bad, Jaden Blue, the fumble in the fourth quarter. Come on, man. Come on, man. You had the opportunity tonight to get some carries because CJ Baxter was hurt, and that's what you do? That was the first turnover of the season for Texas. They almost went 3 full games without a giveaway. And then Jaden Blue, the game was probably in hand. Texas was up 21 in the fourth quarter. So if there is a time, I guess, to turn it over, it's then. But obviously, you don't ever want to turn it over. And, Tashard Choice and Steve Sarkisian and the rest of the Texas coaching staff not happy with Jaden Blue there. So Blue looked pretty good against Rice. I was hoping he'd get some run tonight. I was hoping he'd get more run moving forward. And when you fumble like that in your time to shine, when CJ Baxter comes back, I'm not too sure how many more opportunities there are going to be for Jaden Blue in the short term. Not talking about the course of his whole Texas career, but hate that for Jaden Blue. He knows he messed up. And I was hoping Texas could go the full non-conference slate without turning the football over. Unfortunately, that was not the case. I know I'm going way out of order here, and I'm sorry about that. But another good was Savion Red. How about that? A couple of fourth down conversions for him. The wild horn, wildcat, red cat, whatever you want to call that package, it worked a couple of times. And Savion Red, I heard Trey talking about this last night in the postgame. He was the scout team quarterback before the Alabama game. He was Jalen Milroe in practice. And I wonder if Sark is like, damn, no, this guy's pretty good. Like, we could actually make something happen with Savion Red in the backfield. And that worked in a couple of short yardage situations. 2 carries, 12 yards for Savion Red. So, yeah, that's the bad for Jaden Blue is, hey, maybe Savion Red is going to take some snaps away from Jaden Blue in the future. But that fumble kind of stunk. Now the ugly. And once again, you really could just throw the first 3 quarters worth of offense in the ugly category. I mean, Quinn Ewers' play was pretty ugly. I mentioned the first half stat line, but his overall numbers not much better. 11 for 21 for 131 yards. Did have 2 touchdowns, also had that rushing touchdown as well. So if you're playing fantasy college football, Quinn Ewers at least gave you something. The good news, no turnovers. The bad news is, well, did you watch the game? He looked bad. He looked bad. The mechanics were off. He was missing guys. Now, he didn't get a lot of help. I think Texas had 6 drops in the first half alone, and that's another ugly right there. The wide receivers, these wide receivers are way too good to be dropping as many passes as they're dropping. I mean, it's ridiculous how we're still talking about this right now. Running backs and receivers, but like receivers, come on, it's your job to catch the ball, help out your quarterback a little bit. They were not helping Quinn Ewers in the slightest, but I'm not absolving Quinn Ewers of all of the blame here. It looked like a different guy than the guy that we saw terrorizing a Nick Saban defense. And I know Alabama didn't play well yesterday at all. Well, their defense did. They gave up 3 points. Their offense, that's the issue. They've got to figure that thing out. But like their defense is really, really good. And Quinn Ewers picked them apart in Tuscaloosa. And then against one of the worst secondaries statistically in the country, he looked like that. Like how hard to wrap your head around it, right? Like the first half against Rice and then a lot of this game against Wyoming, that was what plagued Quinn Ewers in this Texas offense last year, guys. The inconsistencies in the passing game. You know, Ewers against Bama before he got hurt last year, amazing. The Oklahoma game, amazing. The second half of the season, Oklahoma State, TCU, too much bad from Quinn Ewers. And we were really hoping he had turned a corner going into this season. And I was really hoping after the Alabama game, and then he's the guy who calls the players only meeting on Tuesday. It's like, oh, he's going to hold everyone accountable, which means he's going to go out there and play really, really well against Wyoming on Saturday. And he just didn't. So, yeah, you can't, like the Big 12 is down this year. So maybe you can, but if Texas wants to be a playoff team in 2023, which they sure as hell didn't look like one last night, but obviously they're undefeated right now through non-conference play for the first time since 2012, by the way. That's an awful stat, but thank God we don't have to talk about that for much longer. If you want to be a playoff team this year, you can't have games like that from Quinn Ewers. Like that's not good enough. That is not good enough. So he's still the best quarterback on the team. No, they should not make any changes there. He just needs to be better. And he also needs more help from his teammates. You've got a lot of Sunday players in that wide receiver / tight end room. You can't have the amount of drops that Texas has had through 3 weeks. I think they showed the stat early on LHN, like Texas was top 10 or bottom 10, however you want to look at it, in drops going into last night. And obviously with what they did in the first half, I don't have the total drop numbers. I know it was 6 in the first half. I'm going to do a Twitter search while I'm talking to you guys on this pre-recorded video here to see if I can find something. I just search Texas drops and I'm not seeing an exact number. Whatever the number is, too many. That's not a hot take. I think everybody agrees with me there. So that's the ugly. Like this offense, just they've got to be better. The good news is this defense is great, but look, the offense looked bad against Rice and Wyoming. I know Rice had a nice win against Houston last week. I know Wyoming beat Texas Tech. Those are still two of, if not the 2 worst teams on Texas's schedule this year. Now, Iowa State sucks. Houston sucks. So, okay, maybe there's some competition there with some of the teams at the back half of the Big 12, but still, it's discouraging that the passing game has been as inconsistent as it's been in the 2 non-conference games. Obviously, against Alabama, it was great. Okay, no problems there. But Rice and Wyoming, that's not ideal for this Texas football team. And they've played 3 games, guys, and they haven't cracked 40 points. Like that was my whole bit this offseason was I wanted Texas to average 40 plus a game on offense. And I thought for sure against Rice, maybe and Wyoming, but definitely or Wyoming, they would have found a way to get a 40 burger up there. They didn't do it. They didn't do it in either of those games. Just 10 points going into the fourth, obviously 31 total for the game last night for Texas. So that's the ugly. And then I cut this thing up Look, it's so funny. I'm obviously guilty of this too. People don't care what a coach says after a great performance. Like, Sark could have told me the earth was flat after beating Alabama, and I would have been like, yes, it is, coach. You and Kyrie Irving, absolutely right. The earth is very much flat. I would have bought it. But after, I know Texas won, but after a lackluster performance, you just psychoanalyze everything the coach says. And that's what I'm doing. This is the open. I got the video here, the opening minute of Steve Sarkisian's press conference when he was giving his opening statement after the win. He made a comparison between this year's Texas team and the '05 Texas team, and it didn't land, and I'll tell you why after the video.
Well, I think first of all, I love kind of quoting Mac Brown on this. I was watching, we watched it as a team actually in training camp, the documentary on the '05 team. And I'm not exactly sure who we played after the Ohio State game. And it was kind of, I think, a little bit similar to this one. You guys will do your research and tell me after, I'm sure. But he used a quote in there that we had a bunch of sore backs going into that game from everybody patting us on the back about how great we were and how great we played. And even tonight going into the stadium, as I was taking the field, fans congratulating us on the win last week. And it's human nature to sometimes get distracted by that, and you lose sight of what's right in front of you. And I think it kind of showed in the first half, especially offensively.
So there was Sark, and obviously he kept going for another couple of minutes, but I didn't want to play the whole thing. Hey, Sark asked us to do the research, so I did the research. After that huge win in Columbus in week 2 of the '05 season, Texas came back home to take on Rice, funny enough. The final score of that game, 51-10. And that wasn't a strong fourth quarter performance by Texas. The Longhorns, let me make sure I have this right. They led 14-0 after the first quarter. They led 42-0 at halftime. That's not what happened last night at all. It was 7-3 Wyoming after the first quarter, and then Texas only led by 3 at halftime. And obviously this game was tied after 3 quarters. So maybe rewatch that documentary, Sark. I don't know. Like, I'm sure Mac Brown, what he said was right. I'm sure Texas got a bunch of pats on the back after winning that game in the shoe, but they did not. And look, that game was a long time ago. I was pretty young. I'm not going to sit here and act like I remember watching Texas put a whooping on Rice vividly. But just a little box score check tells me that no, Texas, they didn't struggle. So maybe we can hold off on the '05 comparisons for now. I don't know. But yeah, it was that was ugly right there from Sark. Like that can't be your opener at the press conference saying that the '05 team did something very similar and then be way off on that diagnosis. I might be the only person who cares about something like that, but I care about something like that. Once again, lackluster performance. So I get mad when the coach says something that I disagree with. That's how it is. But hey, Texas got the win. That's the important thing. Hell, the Longhorns might actually move up in the rankings on tomorrow. Today, it's Sunday, because of what Florida State did. I know Florida State won. They beat Boston College, but 2-point win on the road against BC. Wasn't a great performance by them. There's a chance that Texas maybe moves up into the top 3. I don't know if the AP voters are going to reward the Longhorns after performance like what we saw last night. But the good news is Texas got the win. That's the best good that I have for you because, once again, Texas Tech, they let Wyoming stick around for a long time. They didn't leave the game against the Cowboys with the W. The Longhorns, thanks to a strong fourth quarter, did leave with a win. Texas 3-0 for the first time since 2012. My goodness. Conference play begins next Saturday as the Longhorns take their talents up I-35 to Waco to play the Baylor Bears for the last time in a long, long time. Congrats to Baylor. They beat Long Island, the Ice Tees, yesterday. Their first win of the season. They'll be juiced up. Everybody's juiced up. It's Texas. Hopefully the Longhorns can begin conference play with a victory next Saturday. All right, that's going to do it for this video. Thank y'all so much for watching. If you made it this long, salute. Appreciate you guys. Please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. Tell your friends and enemies about what we have going on at Texas Sports Unfiltered. We are live every weekday from 8 to 5. That's right, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. A bunch of different shows, a bunch of super talented hosts. Make sure you're subscribed. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you're missing out. Once again, big time giveaway when we get to 5,000 subs, which will hopefully happen in the very, very near future. All right. Appreciate y'all watching. Thanks so much. Y'all enjoy your Sunday. Y'all have a great week. Until next time, y'all stay safe. Y'all stay healthy. And hook 'em.